So this is the first in a series of videos looking at different aspects of conflicts. Now, over the last couple of lessons we've spent some time looking at a number of different conflicts, international conflicts, conflicts at national scales and regional scales, and conflicts at a local scale. And what this series of slides will take you through today or this evening, depending on when you're watching them, are three key concepts that you need to understand and grasp, and I suggest you take notes along with this video. And those three concepts are those of nationalism, regionalism, and localism. Before we get going, here's a quick video just to get you thinking about nationalism. And my question that I want you to think about is this typical of English nationalism?
And why are you here today?
I'm here to protest, right? Because I'm going on a march because I want Britain to be back British. I want Britain to be back British. We've got interracial law, and the Muslimic infidel, they're trying to get their law over our country, and it is happening. It's happening in other countries. Everything, it's happening in every country. It's like you've got the Iraqi law that they put down in London. Like, we're more or less near London today, but they're trying to put the Iraqi law down on London. They're just trying to put their law down on us, and we can't stand for that.
Which Iraqi law is this?
It's the Muslimic law. They've got their law. Obviously, it's their law, isn't it? Like, we can't do anything about that. But we're just trying to stop Muslimic. You've got Muslimic rape gangs nowadays. There's 15-year-olds getting raped and everything. It just can't happen. That's why all these people are there. All these people around us, that's why they're there.
Thank you very much.
So after that quite unbelievable video, I just want to first start off talking about the concept of nationalism. And as you can see here, I've defined it as the attachment of a person to a nation or political action by a group or groups of people to achieve statehood. We're going to run through a couple of examples over the following few slides, just so that this puts it in context for you. And if you were asked this sort of question in an exam, to give an example of nationalism, that you are comfortable with that term. So the first example that I've chosen to look at is Scottish nationalism. Now, I'm just going to shift the slide around slightly. Scottish nationalism, you should be obviously aware of this. The Scottish National Party, the SNP, here's their symbol down in the left-hand corner, led by Alex Salmond. He's this guy up here. And the Scottish Nationalist Party, the biggest party in Scotland, campaign and want full independence from the UK. They've campaigned for a referendum to be held in Scotland, I think in 2015 or 2016, and the result of that will largely determine whether devolution and complete independence continues to go ahead. Catalan nationalism, again in a similar sort of vein to that witnessed in Scotland. There are a number of political parties in Catalonia, the largest of whom I've written down here, the CIU, which is known as the Convergence and Union Party. They again are seeking complete independence from the Spanish state. Catalonia has already gone down a certain path to independence, so at the moment they have their own parliament, their own police force, and they largely are self-governing, but they are still within the Spanish state. What the CIU and Catalan nationalists continue to campaign for is complete independence and the formation of a new sovereign state. So this banner down here is effectively campaigning for Catalonia to become the newest state in Europe. Lastly, on the subject of nationalism, we have Basque nationalism. Again, in Spain. This time, however, Basque nationalism, you will notice from the map down here, the Basque region does extend across the border into France from Spain. So it doesn't necessarily have to be within a country's borders, but Basque nationalists, led by the Basque Nationalist Party, the BNP, okay, not the British National Party, but obviously the Basque National Party, again campaigning for full independence. We've got a typical photo from a protest march, some traditional Basque dress and the Basque flag here, and also in the bottom right-hand corner here we've got a sticker which was photographed on a lamppost in the Basque Country, effectively expressing the desire for or the identification of the Basque Country as an independent state. It's not part of Spain. Okay, and I want to talk briefly about regionalism, slightly different concept. Regionalism, as I have here, is loyalty to a distinct regional identity, and I've identified that perhaps as a language or a common heritage or history. I've said there that it can sometimes lead to the development of a political system in that region. So this loyalty and this distinct regional identity can then give rise to wishes to start developing a regional political system. And it is at this point, however, I just want to distinguish for you between regionalism and nationalism as concepts. When we talk about nationalists, as we have done in the previous few slides, we saw that the common thread there was independence from the sovereign state that that region or area is part of. Now, regionalism itself, regionalists often only seek increasing autonomy, and they do not necessarily seek independence. Autonomy being a greater amount of self-rule, perhaps their own parliament, the ability to set their own taxation rates, perhaps make their own laws, etc. So regionalism in that respect is slightly different. I want you to have that in mind as we go through the next couple of examples. The first example of regionalism that we're going to look at is from the UK. It's Cornish regionalism. Now, many of you will be familiar with the flag of St Piran, which is the white cross on the black background, as being that used by Cornish regionalists to identify with the county of Cornwall. Cornwall's heritage can be traced back to Celtic times, has an ancient language, and also there is a very definite feeling of a Cornish identity or ethnicity. In 2001, for the first time in the UK, inhabitants of Cornwall could record their ethnicity as Cornish on the national census. And in 2004, the school census in Cornwall carried a Cornish option as a subdivision of White British. So there is a growing acknowledgement of a certain Cornish ethnicity within Britain, within the UK. And this party here, this political party, which is the Party for Cornwall, Mebion Cernal, are again the party, or the regionalist party, that campaigned for increased devolution, not full independence. Our second example of regionalism is that from across the Channel in France, of the Savoy region. And we can see here, just for information, where the Savoy region is. Many of you have probably skied in the region of Savoy and will probably be familiar with the regional flag. This party here, this first party that I've listed, the Savoy Region Movement, is the equivalent of Mebion Cernal. So they are the party that campaign for the creation of a new region. And effectively what they're campaigning for is for the region of Savoy, which is here, to be joined to a neighbouring region of Haute-Savoy to create a larger new region. Okay, so they are just campaigning for the creation of a new region, of joining two existing regions up. They're also supporters of Franco-Provençal language, which is the regional language, again looking at identity here, cultural identity, linguistic identity, called Arpitan. That's the name of the language common to this region. Now this second party that I have listed here, underlining in red, the Savoyan League, is again another political party, but this time they are a political party that campaign for full independence. So we may describe this party as slightly more nationalistic rather than regionalistic. And finally, the last of the three concepts that I want to take you through today is that of localism. And localism is often identified with that phrase NIMBYism, not in my backyard. Local movements often promote local history and culture associated with very specific places. Okay, so it may be a town, a village, a particular park, or a very small area of a certain country. It rarely manifests itself politically, so we don't associate political parties with localism, but we more often than not do get campaign groups, and I'll take you through a couple of examples that I've picked out here. These campaign groups are often worried about environmental degradation of the area or opposed to certain developments which may change its appearance or affect the well-being of the people who live in that particular area. It's often linked to potential impacts on real estate or house prices. So for example, our first picture down here, which is HS2, which is the new high-speed link proposed between London and Birmingham. The constituents of areas in the Chilterns, so that's just to the northwest of London, launched a number of objections against the planned route to HS2, which at the moment is running very close to their homes in a particularly wealthy area of the country. The second example here, which is just in the top corner, refers to a campaign back in 2007 in Ashted in Surrey. So Ashted in Surrey, which is a town to the south of London. In 2007, SAFA, which is a military charity, bought a property for about £1.7 million, and their proposal was to convert that into a family support centre for nearby Headley Court, which is the wounded personnel centre where amputees get rehabilitated. And they wanted to use this property to house the families who were visiting their loved ones having treatment at Headley Court. Now, local objectionists, so local NIMBYs, formed a campaign group, and they were known as the 36 Grays Lane campaign group. They objected, or they launched a number of objections against this development because they were worried about increases in traffic, noise, and somewhat ridiculously, an increased threat of terrorism in Ashted in Surrey. So, what we've gone through there are three important concepts of nationalism, regionalism, and localism. What I'd like you to do is make sure that you have notes summarising what I've said and some of the slides. You need to have one or two examples for each of those three concepts. So nationalism, regionalism, and localism. You need to have examples to illustrate what those concepts are and examples of conflicts pertaining to those three terms.